talk about, so I'm Stephanie Minnich, by the way, and I'm one of the launch coaches that help with the helpline. And Amanda's out of town. And so today we're just going to talk about some frequently asked questions that come up through the hotline or helpline. Just because they seem to be like kind of a recurring pattern where people are asking some of the same things. So we thought maybe it would be helpful to go over them with the group. Just as I can get here, who has like called the helpline? Anyone? Couple people? No? Okay. Charlie, sort of. And then how many of you guys have done your first deal already? Couple? Okay, great. So just also, if you can turn your cameras on, that'll just definitely help this be more of a conversation and less of me wondering if y'all are actually there. And then feel free to jump in if you have questions. Let's make this like super informative conversation. Like I would really love for you guys to get more out of this than just me kind of talking at the screen. So I do have just a basic PowerPoint to show you, just so it wasn't just my voice, in case you had any notes that you wanted to take. So let me just get here. I haven't used PowerPoint in like 2 years, so sorry. Here we go. Play from the start. So everyone can see the screen. Thumbs up. Yep. Okay. So I had a couple topics that I wanted to talk about. The biggest one that I thought we'd kind of dive into first is going to be inspections. Talking about right to cure and how you can really explain this to your clients in an easy way that makes sure that they are making an informed decision and you've kind of covered the bases so there's no surprises down the line during the inspection. We're going to talk about the differences between notices, amendments, counters. That's a question we get a lot on the helpline. Just like, hey, I need to do this. What form should I use? We're going to talk a little bit about home warranties and just kind of cameras, single parties versus excluded. And then I've got a financing contingency. While, like right before we jump in, is there anything that you guys would like to talk about today that would make this time that we're together worthwhile? Question you've been dying to ask? Something you're stumbling against? All right, well then it'll be an easy group. There's got to be something, so as we go along, just pop on if you have questions. So inspections, most commonly in a traditional market, you'll see these happening within the first 14 days of inspection or of your offer being accepted. I'm sure a lot of us are writing competitive offers right now. I know I am. And truth be told, 14 days is kind of long right now. And this is one way that you can make your offer a little bit more appealing would be to shorten that time frame. So as I wrote on this, fewer days can be more competitive. So I just got an offer on a listing of mine. They wanted an inspection. They made it for 8 days. So that's certainly more appealing to a seller than 14. The biggest thing here is if you are going to cut your inspection time down, you may want to consider pre-booking a home inspection. So if you start working with the same inspectors again and again, they'll let you do this. So I work with Mark Henry. I would say 90% of our inspections he does. And when I'm writing an offer, I will text him and I'll say, hey, what's your availability this week? And he'll kind of let me pencil me in. You've got to let him know right away because that's his business, that's his livelihood. So you do have to let them know right away if you don't get the accepted offer. But pre-booking your inspection can make your offer competitive because you can shorten the number of days that your inspection contingency lasts. So keep in mind that whatever time frame you put, that means your inspection needs to take place, all follow-up inspections have to take place, and negotiations to an agreement all within that time frame. So that's why if you are putting like 7 days, 10 days, you definitely want to make sure you've got people lined up. So for instance, you might not wait until you have the inspection to say that, oh, we need a chimney inspection, and then I'm booking that. I might stack all of that up front when I do those condensed times.
Steph, is there any advantage to getting to know inspectors ahead of time, or could I just cold call your inspector and say, hey, I'm a friend of Steph and can you book an inspection? I mean, how chummy do you have to be with them?
It kind of depends on their availability. I think it's definitely like as you start to build your business, you start to build your team, right? So, for instance, like we refer a lot of the same lenders who do great work, same with inspectors, same with chimney people. And then as you use them more, they know that you've got a client and that they like you're part of a team. So, like if I'm texting Mark Henry or Ian with Home Team, on a Saturday, they're more likely to respond to me because I've used them more than once, right? But as you start growing your business, just you kind of build your own team so that happens for you later. Same with lenders. Like if you're working with BMO, you probably won't be able to get a hold of that lender outside of business hours. But if you're working with someone that you know and have built a relationship with, like they're going to respond to you and get a pre-approval letter for you on a weekend.
How big
So,
is the inspector universe, and are there like inspectors you should avoid?
yeah, I think everyone probably has like their pros and cons. The inspectors that I like take detailed photos. I've seen some inspection reports that only have photos of the items in question and not photos of everything they inspect. I prefer, I don't know that anyone does handwritten reports anymore, but there might still be someone. I prefer to not have handwritten reports. I look for inspectors who are non-alarmist and are not going to scare my client, that are just going to really explain things matter-of-factly. So this is all part of you talking with other agents. You'll see on one of our later slides, our Facebook page is a great resource for that. Ask people who their preferred inspectors are. I bet you'd see a common theme in our office. And then just start looking at their websites, start getting to know them, shadow people on inspections if you don't have the opportunity yet for an inspection. You can shadow people and get to learn different inspector styles. You should attend the inspection. If you cannot just give the buyer and the inspector the lockbox code and think that everything's going to be okay. Someone representing you and your position as that buyer's agent should be there. So if you can't be there, that's just a great time when you can post on our Facebook page to try to find someone to cover for you. Sometimes I can't make the whole inspection, so I'll kind of get someone to cover for me and I'll show up at the last hour. So just make sure that someone is there from Keller Williams representing you. It's really important for them to kind of be your eyes and the ears so that you know what's taking place, especially if the buyer is there. A lot of times inspections on a just general size house in the North Shore will take probably 3 to 4 hours. So many times I will tell my clients that you are welcome to be at the inspection for the whole time. You can follow the inspector around if you'd like, or it's a little bit of a hurry up and wait type situation. So if you don't have like measurements to take, paint colors to pick, things like that, you can show up later. So if, when I say you, I mean the buyer. So for instance, if I have an inspection starting at 8 a.m., I might suggest that the buyer comes around 9:30. That way the inspector has like a general sense of what's happened on the outside, what's going on the main floor, and can fill the buyer in when they arrive. Again, if your buyer wants to attend the whole thing, that's totally fine. This is their inspection to really get to know the home. So let's bounce to the next thing. If you are on your last day, so if you are at 14 days and you're not sure that you've come to a resolution, one of 3 things needs to happen. you need to draft an amendment and get the seller to agree to an extension. It's a simple amendment, and all you would say is inspection, and if you have any testing contingencies, so inspection and testing contingencies are hereby extended through, and then put a specific date. Make sure that you're giving yourself enough time. So if you're doing an extension, you know, do I have the ability to bring in a contractor within that extension period? So try not to extend, like if I can't get a chimney person in until Monday, I'm probably going to extend through Tuesday or Wednesday. Second option would be an amendment with both parties signing it, agreeing to a price reduction, a closing cost credit, or some type of repairs being done prior to closing. Let's see, I just got a question. Can you give notice of extending inspection time if after the inspection you find out that they need additional inspections and they don't have availability within your inspection window? Absolutely. The part is though that you need both parties to agree to that. So instead of giving notice, you would draft an amendment. So you draft an amendment requesting the extension. And then you need that seller to sign off on it before 11:59 on the day of your due date. So for me, if I am up on, let's say my inspection is day 13 and it's due on 14 days, on day 13, if I don't think we're close, I'm proposing an extension. I truly hate dealing with deadlines at 9 p.m. the day they're due. It's no one is ever working in like a calm state of mind. So I'm always trying to kind of work those things in advance to allow people some breathing room. So definitely extend. That can allow time, like both parties to kind of have cooler heads about them to negotiate a fair resolution. And the last thing, so if I can't come to an agreement, if the seller is unwilling to grant an extension, that's when I'm drafting a notice of defects. The biggest thing that I can stress to you is to never let a deadline lapse without doing one of these three things. If you do none of these and day 14 passes and now we're at day 15, the buyer has purchased the home as is. There's no recourse for that buyer to ask for repairs or get out of the deal. So that's why it's so important to do one of those three things to protect that buyer. And these are conversations that I'm having with my client to kind of prep them along the way, to say, this is what we'll need to do before today. What I have done, oh, go ahead.
For the amendment agreeing to a credit reduction or repairs, assuming that you are communicating with the listing agent before you're sending that over so that you expect that it'll be signed?
Definitely.
Okay.
Great point. So let's say, so after the inspection takes place, in the offer, it says that we have to deliver a copy of the inspection report to the sellers. So we will deliver that inspection report to the seller's agent. So they'll have a kind of an understanding of what's going on. Then generally there'll be like a phone call with me and the other agent to say, hey, these are the things that we're probably going to do some follow-up inspections on. I've got them lined up for this date and this date. These are the biggest concerns. I'm chatting with the buyer later, but I do expect to be submitting an amendment with asking for some repairs. At this time, during the inspection, kind of after I huddle with my buyer and I say, okay, you're going to get a copy of the report tomorrow. Why don't we plan to talk tomorrow night? Because then I'll have a time to review it, you will, and let's regroup. And then I let them know that they kind of have a couple options in terms of asking for a credit, which would be a closing cost credit. So closing cost credit would be a credit to them at closing. It doesn't put any money in their pocket, but what it does is will allow them to save money on their closing costs and prepayables. So a prepayable is something like where you prepay insurance, you prepay taxes, all of these charges on a closing statement. So there are generally limits to what a buyer can receive for a closing cost credit. Always check with your lender on what that means. You can ask for a price reduction and that the buyer would handle those repairs post-closing. It's generally easiest to ask for a price reduction when you have estimates so that you know an approximate cost for something and you can use that as leverage with the seller to say, hey, this will cost X, we'll handle it post-closing in exchange for an adjustment on the price. Keep in mind that it's important to prep buyers that this is an estimate, but it's not necessarily a firm cost. So for example, if I need to do some chimney work, right? There's some tuck pointing, there's some liner work inside. There might be some work that isn't discovered until the contractors are actually kind of taking down the chimney and looking at the bricks from the inside. So there is a little bit of a risk that they could be assuming more cost post-closing by doing the work after closing. So just make sure you're having those conversations. The biggest thing I can suggest when you're doing an inspection is it all comes down to prepping the clients for what to expect. That starts from your buyer consultation all the way into showings where maybe we're pointing out things that are likely to come up on inspection, pointing out things that aren't considered a defect, but they might come up on inspection. For instance, a torn window screen is not a defect. It is, however, something that the inspector will probably take note of. I will actually send my clients a sample inspection report. So if you've done an inspection before, you can use that report, just block out the names, black out any names. I love giving the inspection report ahead of time because it shows a buyer that almost every inspection report is probably going to be at least 40 pages. If you think about it as a new buyer, maybe a first-time buyer, and you get a report that's 40 pages long, that's probably like kind of nerve-wracking to someone. But if they saw one already and it was the same length and you prep them to understand that they're all about that long because of all the photos and template language in the inspection report, that might help them better understand that this house is not a lemon, right? That this house has things that almost every house will have coming up on the inspection. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. So in the inspection contingency, we've got a couple places of information that you should point out. So obviously we're gonna mark 193X. If they're not doing an inspection, we're gonna mark it NA. Any boxes that we're not using, any contingencies that we're not using should always be marked NA. If you leave it blank, which some agents do, it could look like you forgot to include something. So my recommendation would be always to mark something NA if you're not using it. Basically, it says that you are authorized to have a home inspection. Item 2 here says it's further contingent upon you having a qualified inspector or independent third party inspect, and then you get to put in anything in your blank lines. Some people will put entire premises, some people leave it blank. There's lots of different options. What this line here means is that the first section on 194 says that the inspector can come in, a general home inspector, and if he or she recommends any follow-up inspections, then you can have them. But if they're not in writing that he or she recommends the follow-up inspection, you cannot do them. So what lines like section 2 here allows me to do is that if I look at a house and I say, we need this chimney inspected, and I don't want to rely on the home inspector recommending it, if I put chimneys, then I can do that right away without relying on the home inspector. So this is the standard language that we use on our team. Every now and then we'll delete this based on how competitive we need to be, based on the property. This is where you'll put components like swimming pool, if you want a swimming pool inspected. Anything that you're concerned about, you'll want to add in here if you want the ability to have them inspected right away. Any questions about that section? Cool. All right, so next, I put the star down by line, 210. So it says these two lines are super important. This says, for the purposes of this contingency, defects do not include structural, mechanical, or other conditions the nature and extent of which buyer had actual knowledge of or written notice before signing this offer. So what's an example of someone having written notice of a defect before they would sign an offer? What forms are we provided about a house when we're writing offers?
The record.
Yep. Condition report. So, Charlie, if my condition report says furnace does not work, what do these lines mean to me in terms of a buyer?
That then you're made aware and can't really work with that because that they disclosed it.
Exactly. So if it's a specific defect that's disclosed on that condition report, if these lines are not stricken, I think strike through, if these lines are not addressed and they are left as normal, then I, as the buyer, cannot consider the furnace not working as a defect. So the inspector is likely going to say, hey, the furnace doesn't work. At that time, we cannot, it's not considered a defect. The buyer could certainly ask for the seller to fix it, but they can't back out of the offer because the furnace is broken, because we had written notice of this before signing this offer. So if there's ever something on a condition report that you're concerned about, and you're like, I really want to be able to inspect that and consider it a defect, strike these lines out. I do it on almost every offer. It protects my buyer. I do it out of habit. So even if there's nothing on the condition report, I'll just generally strike them out as well. It just opens up more opportunities for things to be considered a defect. Any questions on that?
Even in this competitive market?
Generally, sometimes if it's super competitive and there are defects specifically listed on the condition report, if my buyer is comfortable taking those on, then I'll leave that. But honestly, I would tell you, I think most agents don't even see that that's been removed from the contract. So as you consider put yourselves in the shoes of a listing agent, this would be one section where we'd always want to be looking.
You might have already said this, but just to reiterate, you cannot, on line 197 is putting as recommended by home inspector, not the same thing as what you have there.
Right. I really so technically that language that you're talking about is really already here. It's already on buyer may have follow-up inspections recommended in a written report resulting from an authorized inspection. So technically that's already there. That brings up a really good point on how you see that language a lot in testing contingencies. And there's a little bit of a gray area on if that can be used, because the offer states, in the offer, and this is a screenshot, otherwise I would scroll to it, but the offer states testing any test and inspection must be specific and included in writing. So if we say testing whatever is recommended by the home inspection, that's really not specific. So what we're doing is saying mold, asbestos drain tile, comma, if recommended by home inspector. But Celia, that's a really good question because you see that a lot. So it's a little gray. I would maybe talk to Kimmy and Joan if that's okay to use and if that's protecting your client enough. Great question. And then on line 212, this is your biggest just safety net to be able to explain to a buyer what actually a defect is. Because it's kind of sometimes when you look at those reports, there's lists of huge things, right? Inspections are categorized by major concerns, safety hazards, improvement items, deferred cost items that need repair. And like an improvement item maybe isn't necessarily a defect, right? It's something that you could do to make the house run better or more efficiently, but not necessarily be considered a defect. So I always refer to this, it's actually on two places in the offer, but it says a defect means a condition that would have a significant adverse effect on the value of the property, that would significantly impair the health or safety of a future occupant, or that if not repaired, removed, or replaced, would significantly shorten or adversely affect the normal life of the premises. So this is just like your check and balance on what you come back with. And this is how you can guide your client to kind of prioritize what needs to be addressed on the inspection. So let's go to the next section. And we're going to talk about right to cure. Who feels like comfortable, like I nail this every time on how to explain it? Anyone? I've had a couple conversations with you guys. I think this is one of the hardest things to explain to a buyer, especially a first-time buyer. So it's so important though, because the last thing you want to do is have a buyer choose shall have a right to cure and then say, ugh, I don't want to move forward, and have them think that they can unilaterally move out, like back out of a deal, because it's not necessarily the case. So we get to decide if the seller shall or shall not have a right to cure. The important thing, sometimes we get phone calls on the helpline and I say, we're dealing with an inspection, and I'll say, all right, does the seller have a right to cure? And the agent will say, no, the buyer does. That's actually not an option, right? So it's the seller shall or shall not. So there is no buyer right to cure. And it's really important that you explain this to your buyer before drafting an offer. This could even be done at a consultation if you're talking for like more in depth about the inspection. But if you do it at the consultation, like this is something you kind of talk about a few times because it's a confusing topic for new people. Do not choose 4 people. This can get you into hot water. Make sure you're having a conversation and they are choosing what's best for themselves. It's also important to know that the seller has a right to cure the defects, but not an obligation. So the seller is never obligated to do anything. You could write a $50,000 over ask offer and have an inspection, and they still don't have to do anything. So just make sure that the buyer knows that. We'll often talk to our buyers to say, okay, the biggest thing during an inspection is there's no right or wrong, no fair outcome. It's just a matter of what the seller is willing to do and what you're willing to accept. That's it. And when you kind of bring it down to that, it just helps negotiate. So if the seller has a right to cure, basically the seller has final say on if the deal stays together. The seller also has more input on how things are fixed and who fixes them. In the contract, you also have a right to cure period. And I wish I would have screenshot this. By default, it's 10 days, I think it is. So if you don't put anything in the blank and you give a notice of defects, the seller then has 10 days to decide if they will cure the defects or if they're just not going to move forward. Consider shortening that. That's like one of the biggest tips I can give you today is 10 days is a long time, especially when we're in spring market. Your buyer might need to be in a home by a certain time. The buyer might be missing out on other opportunities. So I try to shorten that. It protects my buyer to like keep things moving and not miss out on other opportunities. But B, it also gives the seller a little bit more of like a pressured feeling to make a decision. So that would be, if you are giving a right to cure, that would be a big tip to give you. And that would be for inspection, testing, and appraisal as well. So shall have a right to cure is super seller friendly. Our team will rarely give right to cure without modified language, and I've got that for you, and I can share that with you guys. Let's see. Okay, So we've got seller has a right to cure on one side. That's very seller friendly. On the opposite side of that spectrum is seller shall not have a right to cure. So this means that the buyer has final say on if a deal stays together. The buyer has more control over what contractors are used. So sellers don't love this option because what could happen is there could be one defect on the inspection report, and the seller could be willing to fix that, but the buyer could still walk away. And so even if the seller is willing to fix things, the buyer has the right to walk away. So it's very buyer friendly. In today's competitive market, saying shall not have a right to cure could potentially determine the outcome of your offer is accepted or not. I like to look, when we're talking about shall have a right to cure versus shall not, I really like to look at the house, right? Does it seem like it's been taken care of? Is the seller kind of have they let things kind of go and deteriorate, right? Can you see signs of things being serviced over time, right? Do they have a list of improvements that they've done, right? The more the seller has taken care of that home, the easier it'll be to give a right to cure because they've shown a history of doing things, right? So that middle ground language is basically what you do is you give the seller a right to cure. So you do the right to cure, you do the shortened time frame, but then somewhere in additional provisions, you need to say, in regards to the inspection period or inspection contingency, seller shall have a right to cure, provided buyer and seller mutually agree on contractors and method of cure. So what this does is it kind of creates a neutral playing field. So it's not too buyer friendly, it's not too seller friendly, but both parties need to agree on the scope of the work and how things are fixed and who does it rather. So this is a great tool to use to give the right to cure, but still protect your buyer. Let's see, I think we've got some questions. Okay, so it says, we've got a question that says, if a buyer is going to take care of $2,000 or less repairs and was aware of the defective furnace, would it make sense to have it inspected? I think that would really just depend on how competitive you want your offer to be. So a furnace repairs can certainly be under $2,000, but a replacement will probably be more than that. So if you, sorry, Bridget, I'm reading yours. I can send you the PowerPoint. Yeah. So I guess it just is a matter, Grady, like you said, if you want to be competitive, if I wanted my buyer, the buyer really wanted this house, and they've said this furnace doesn't work or it needs $1,000 worth of work, I'd probably try to get my buyer to take that on just to be cleaner and not re-inspect something that the seller is already disclosing as broken. But you just have to make sure that your buyer has the funds to do so and willing to do so. Grady, did that answer your question? Okay, cool. All right. Ooh. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. It looks like my other slides didn't save. So, okay. Any other questions about the inspection contingency? Any questions that you guys want to talk about while we're here related to an inspection?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When things are on the real estate condition report, then you have the inspection. Are you not allowed to bring up any of those? Is that why some agents line out a couple of lines on the contract to be? And if you don't line out those couple of lines, that I'll have to look up so the rest of the team knows what I'm talking about. But then can you not ask for anything that was disclosed?
Yep. So in the slideshow, I think you hadn't jumped on yet.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's totally fine. So yeah, if there's stuff on the condition report that you aren't sure about, right? Definitely delete those lines. It's lines 210 and 210 and 211. Just strike those out. And then that opens up the window for you to inspect them. The other thing too is like, it has to be a defect disclosed. Sometimes you'll see more symptoms of a defect on a condition report. So it might say basement leaks, but that's not the cause, right? That's the effect. So there's a little bit of a gray area, and that really hasn't given the buyer actual and written notice about what the defect is. So that's why I really like crossing off those lines, because it kind of eliminates whether it's gray to be investigating something, especially if they haven't really disclosed it specifically, but more just like symptomatically.
And my other question, and if you already talked about this while I was distracted, then I'll just watch the thing on YouTube. My seller wants to sell her home as is. She's like, I am done. I don't want to have to do a single thing. I'm trying to understand what that means when a buyer comes in and like wants an inspection and wants things fixed.
Okay.
That works.
Exactly. Like, how do you protect your buyer with as is listings?
Great topic. Yeah, and you'll see this kind of every now and then, especially for homes, sometimes flippers, sometimes estate sales. So like someone who's selling, like who's a trust, like they've never lived in the property, they'll sell like that. So if it says as is, a couple things. The sellers and seller's agent will probably want that somewhere noted on your offer. So like in additional provisions, you would kind of write in, buyer acknowledges that this property is being sold as is. Usually if that's like in a private remark, I'll try to follow the format of the language in the private remark and insert that into my offer. When it's being sold as is, the buyer can still have their inspection period. So you would still mark the inspection with an X and do an inspection the way you would for any other home. It's generally a signal to the buyer that they don't want to do any work prior to closing. So most times people are willing to negotiate price-wise, closing cost credit-wise, but they're not willing to do work in the home prior to closing. So if I were working with a seller who's saying that, I would probably kind of dig a couple layers more to say, okay, tell me what that means to you. Like, I know what it means to me, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. And then kind of they'll probably elaborate a little bit more. And then you could say something like, many of our clients who choose to sell as is do so because they don't want to hire contractors prior to closing. Is that the case here? And then maybe say, would you still be open to like a financial credit or like a price adjustment? And then they'll probably say yes. So you're probably just like setting them up to confirm what you're thinking. So you can, from the buyer's perspective, you can definitely still have an inspection. I would maybe call that agent before and try to walk through what that as is really means for them. A lot of times it's being sold as is, whereas, and makes no representations to the condition of the property, and there's no condition report. I see that a lot for flippers. And so then in my offer, I'm acknowledging the as is sale, and then I say, buyer waives the opportunity to receive a condition report. So that's in writing that they know they're not going to get a condition report. Chances are, a flipper or someone who hasn't lived there isn't going to complete that condition report the way a homeowner would anyway. But it's good to just kind of keep that in writing. Did that kind of answer the as is? Okay. Just for anyone who's typing that they want the PowerPoint, just send me an email. I just put my email in the chat. Okay, so I'm so bummed about my other slides because they were good. Okay, so next we're going to talk about let's go into home warranties. Have you guys like had a class about those or heard from the home warranty people? Not really? Okay, so I'm just gonna cover basics on home warranties. The biggest thing is they don't cover everything, right? Someone taught me this once. The best way to remember what a warranty covers is peach, like the fruit. So peach. This is how I explain it to my buyers. So it covers plumbing, electrical, appliances, cooling, and heating. 5 categories. What I share with my clients is home warranties are okay. Like sometimes people will use them. They cover you for the first year from closing to the first year. And you can often ask the seller to pay for these. And sometimes the sellers will offer to pay for them. So if in a listing, the seller has asked for things if on a listing, the seller is advertising that that they're offering a home warranty, sometimes it's in a condition report too. I would totally take them up on it because that's already been ordered. And I would 100% take them up on that. If the seller is offering that, in Addendum A, you should include that the listing broker will order it because they've likely ordered it already. If you order one too, now there are 2. So just make sure that if the seller's offering it, just ask the listing agent, and a good listing agent will put kind of the approximate cost in private remarks or on that condition report. And then you just pull that information, the listing agent orders it, it's paid for by the seller. If your buyer wants it and it's not already being offered, I would suggest that you order it. Here's the reason. You can control the company and you can add things. So Betsy added into the text, you can add like certain upgrades, right? So if the language on the Addendum A says that the buyer or seller will pay for a home warranty, so let's say we said the seller, at a cost not to exceed, and let's say we put $700. And I get to $700 because I've done the lower deductible plan, I've added roof leaks or pool equipment or well equipment. If I order it, then I can ask for those things. But technically, if we want the buyer to have it and we're asking for the listing agent to order it and it's not already been offered, that language says not to exceed $700. Well, that language is met with a $400 deductible and no upgrades. Does that make sense? So I like to control it. If I'm ordering it, if my buyer wants it, it's not already being offered, you should order it, just so you can control the cost and get as many upgrades as you can to reach that limit that you put in the offer. This is the form that we also have to have the buyer either accept or waive. So let's say it's being offered by a Shore West agent and we're working with the buyer. The form in our folders, we should decline because they're accepting the other coverage. I think sometimes we get a lot of calls on that and whether or not what people should do. The tough part with the warranty is that you should always make sure your clients know, hey, this is going to be cover you for 1 year, but you need to call the warranty company first. You cannot call your plumber and then expect to be reimbursed by the home warranty company. So people who love their contractors and only use specific people, the home warranty might not be advantageous to them because they have to use whoever is on the preferred vendor list. Same with if you're buying a house with a lot of high-end appliances, like Wolf, Sub-Zero, sometimes those aren't covered or they don't have the vendors that service them as part of their program, and it can be a little more problematic to get them covered. So those are just things that we like to talk about with our clients. All right, so we've talked about right to cure, inspection, home warranty.
I have a question on the warranty real quick.
Sure.
Is there a form for the waiver to deny? I wasn't able to find one, or how do you do that?
Great question. it's a little tiny line at the bottom of the form that's in all of our templates. There's like, I think it's a checkbox, like I accept coverage or I decline coverage. And so you just need one person to waive, just one buyer, and you would just click the waiving part. Or so maybe just check the form that's in the templates and zip forms, and it should be down at the bottom.
Yeah, the only one I see is the application.
Yeah, it's on that form all the way down at the bottom.
Oh, I see. It's a really tiny box. Okay.
Yeah, super tiny. Yep. So one form is all you need.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So I think we have 10 minutes left. You're normally an hour, right? Hour. So I had cancellations, I had single parties versus excluded, when to use them. And then I had like just some transactional things. What's most important to you guys? Like what can we get out of the last 10 minutes?
I actually had a question regarding FHA and
Mhm.
how that works with this.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I remember you texted in. What about FHA? Like just in general?
Yeah, because I mean, I know they have their own kind of inspections, right? Or is that different from this, or is that part of the appraisal process? I guess I don't really know a whole lot about FHA.
Great question. Has anyone here done FHA loans yet? Celia, you have? Okay. So FHA.
I have one.
Oh,
I have one right now.
awesome.
It's Melissa,
Okay, cool. Melissa, is it a condo or a single family?
single family.
Okay, cool. And are you under contract?
We made an offer a couple weeks ago. Obviously, didn't get accepted because there was 97 other offers.
Yeah, I have an FHA buyer right now as well, and it can be an uphill battle because they don't have as much money down, and there is this extra inspection, like Caitlin was saying. So FHA is a really terrific program, especially for first-time buyers. You can put as little as like 3.5% down. And people who have lower credit scores that wouldn't qualify conventionally, can qualify for an FHA loan. So it's a great loan. Basically, they wrap like your PMI into your payment, essentially. So two things, just broadly. FHA loans are it's a government loan. And for condos, there is a website that you can go to make sure that your condo association is approved for an FHA loan, because not every condo association is FHA qualified, I guess you'd say. I literally think if you just Google FHA qualified condos, you can find this website, but you can always ask your lender too, because they should have a link to this, because you don't want to get under contract to find out that the condo can't qualify.
I had an FHA buyer who was looking for a condo in Waukesha County, and there's only one
Crazy
in Waukesha County that can be an FHA loan.
Wow.
Just
That's
as an FYI.
so great to know. Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. It's tough. So just that will help you kind of set expectations for the buyer. In terms of a single family or a duplex, the biggest thing is that you do your normal inspection, and then the appraiser comes through, and at that time he does like a little bit of a second inspection, nowhere to the length of what it is like at the first one. The appraiser is looking for safety defects or like safety concerns. So the biggest thing you'll see is exterior paint. So if you're writing on a house that's wood sided or wood garage sided or trim, really take a look at the paint. If there's exposed wood, that will be flagged 100%. So peeling paint, railings on stairs, if there aren't any hand railings, that will get flagged. Smoke detectors, trip hazards. So if there's concrete and it's all like totally unlevel and there's a lot of big trip hazards, that could get flagged and that could be costly. What happens is the appraiser does his or her appraisal, just like anyone else normally would. But there's like this level of what we call subject to. So the appraisal will be subject to these conditions being addressed prior to closing. So what that means is like, okay, well then all of this wood needs to be painted, scraped and painted. We had a duplex last year that was closing FHA buyer, and the painter went and painted, but didn't pick up all their paint scraps, like the little chips paint. Appraiser came back, because they have to come back to check to verify that all of this has been done. And it got flagged again because now there were paint chips in the ground, like around the house. So then the painter had to go back, appraiser had to go back. So it can be like, it could just be like particular, right? So for example, this buyer that I'm working with, and maybe Melissa, this can help you, is the buyer that I'm working with, we wrote into our offer that the buyer would cover the first $2,000 for any subject to call outs, basically, regarding FHA loans. So we've written 2 offers, they haven't been accepted. One, the buyer was willing, it definitely needed paint. So the buyer was going to go out and do the paint themselves prior to the appraiser walking through. You'll need to get the seller's permission and probably like the buyer to sign off to say if they like hurt themselves or something, that they wouldn't, said that the seller was liable. But the biggest thing to know for your buyer is if you're handling these items post-closing or pre-closing rather, in order to get the appraiser to like pass appraisal, you're investing in a home that you don't own. So if my buyer were to go out and do all the painting and then it falls apart at inspection or appraisal, or they can't get financing, they've invested time and money into a home that they don't yet own. But that language about the $2,000 or $3,000 of any subject to FHA callouts, like that can be a way that you can kind of at least eliminate the cause for concern about those things. Caitlin.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you need the language just that I've used, just send me an email.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, and then Caitlin, did that answer a little bit of your question?
I think so. I was just, I don't know the story, not the story, but like the background behind FHA and how the process worked. So the appraiser part was helpful.
Good. I would feel free to like lean on your lenders, like call the lender that is approving them and just say, hey, this is new to me. Can you walk me through anything that I should be considering or prepping the client for as we walk through homes? And they'll be able to give you some good answers too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, well, that was kind of the gist. I wanted to dive deep into the inspection because I think that's the part where a lot of people get stuck on right to cure. If you guys need anything, feel free to reach out to the helpline. I'll send out the slides about the inspection. And if there's any language that you want, just shoot me an email. I put it in the chat, and I'm happy to help as we can. Cool. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Steph,
Yeah.
just really quick.
Yeah.
When you were talking about all that with the FHA and the inspections and appraisal, is it the same for the VA? Like, is that the same reason with the VA loans and why those can be tough? Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to confirm.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it'll be kind of a similar process. And I think the VA does that termite inspection as well. And most most inspectors I know Mark Henry does, I assume others will just kind of write up something to say that they saw no signs of termites. But that's like a layer for the VA inspection.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah.
And one really random one-off question, just since I have you.
Mhm.
My buyer has a pre-approval letter, but it says that she has to sell her condo to buy a home. But
Okay.
now she's sold her condo. And so I said, I think we're gonna need a new pre-approval letter. Can you have your person update that? And the lender was like, I think you're a little premature. I don't need to update this. Am I crazy? Is he crazy? I'm like, I'm not sending an offer to purchase with the pre-approval letter that says we have to sell a home, right? Or maybe
So-
it doesn't matter.
Did the home close or is it just under contract?
It closes, I guess it does, it closes in a couple weeks. So yeah, it's under contract. So maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, maybe just use that. Like, will you have a closing of buyer's property contingency?
No.
No. Okay. So, but they can't get financing without it. So you'll have a financing contingency, right? So I guess I would just let the seller's agent know that the home is under contract. And if you can let them know if it's through any contingencies, that's really important to add. Like, we're through inspection, we're through appraisal, that will help make your offer stronger.
Okay, perfect.
It's interesting, like when your financing is contingent on selling your home, but you're not doing a home sale contingency. It's kind of like a sneaky way to like not do the closing of your property contingency, as long as you for sure know that like the lender will not give financing without that home closing. Because if the home falls apart, you don't want to be stuck here, in your buy side of that. I think
Definitely.
it's pretty solid.
It sounds pretty solid, but I think it would be worth it one more conversation probably just to be sure. I mean, we haven't even started the home search, but I just knew in my head, I'm like, it's not even worth starting the home search if I have this pre-approval letter in my hands because we won't.
Yeah,
Not
it'll
close
be tougher.
right?
Yeah.
It's
But
totally-
maybe like you can share how far away you are, like, or how far into the offer you are. That could help.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Can I ask one more question?
Right. Oh,
Yep.
So I've asked this to other agents in the past and kind of like never really gotten a straightforward answer as to why this is bad. But I'm wondering if you have a pre-approval that says it's contingent on them selling their home and they want to waive the home sale contingency, it would seem that you can still get out on the financing contingency. But then I've had agents say, that's super risky. I would never do that. But like, why is that then?
I guess so. That's kind of like the situation that Bridget's in, that if you were to write something, so it can be. So I think the agents are probably saying that because as a listing agent, it is kind of like, well, it's kind of like sneaky, right? Because you're doing a financing contingency, but no home sale. And I think we've talked about this as a team, and we've basically said, okay, maybe what would be best case, like if you don't want to write a home sale or closing a buyer's property contingency, then me, the buyer, and the lender should all get on the phone and just say, okay, this is what we're thinking. We're thinking about writing an offer that's contingent only on financing and not on closing on their home. Are you for sure telling me that if they don't close on their home, that you will not approve them for financing? Because we really want that assurance to protect your buyer, to be able to get a letter of financing unavailability, because that's what they would need. That's what the buyer would need then to get out of the purchase of their next place. And so I would just like hate for a lender to say, oh yeah, but we have this account here that you have got savings, so we can definitely close. And the buyer's like, wait, I thought I didn't have to. So I think like it would be, if you do that, it would be super prudent to get on the phone with the buyer and the lender at the same time to confirm that that really is the case.
That makes sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think the other agents, I'm assuming, are just like, because it is, I don't know. But, okay, the other example of this is you can technically do a financing contingency and no appraisal contingency, right?
Mhm.
But if the appraisal doesn't come out and the buyer can't get financing, like they literally don't have the extra funds to bring, like that would be like you would be rejected for financing. So then you could get out of the financing contingency and make your offer appear stronger by not having the appraisal. But again, that's really risky too, where you'd want to all group together and say to the lender, are you sure that you would decline us if it came in at a big gap? Because if the buyer has these extra resources, then they have to move forward.
Is that the kind of question that your average like mortgage lender is going to be able to answer? Or are they going to have to like go to underwriting and ask all these other people?
Yeah, they might have to go to their underwriters. And hopefully, if they're like a bank where they can easily access their underwriters, it's a little easier to do.
Mhm.
But they might know like their financial situation. I don't know. The financing and appraisal thing is I think is riskier than the home sale contingency thing.
Because they might be forced to bring money to close that they didn't want to take out of savings.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll see. But from a listing side, it's basically like, why would we want to accept a buyer that's in this sticky of a spot? Or
Yeah, like if you're comparing, if you're in this market where we're comparing a handful of offers, certain sellers will go for certainty over other factors. And it's a really good reminder to look at some of these pre-approval letters. Not just see, oh, there's a pre-approval letter, but like, is there anything that they have to?
or even call the lender as a listing agent to like
Totally.
make sure this buyer is as good as they say they are in the offer.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Cool.
This job is so scary.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's why like having things in writing, like I'll like when I send my offers, I'll kind of just do like if we're waiving things, like I'll put that like I meant to bring this up for the financing. I'm sorry, for the inspection. If we're not doing an inspection, I'm going to put NA on that contingency, but I'm also putting language in the offer that says buyer has been made aware of the benefit of a home inspection and waives the opportunity to do an inspection, basically. So that it's, again, just like really calling out what they're waiving. Anything you can put in writing between emails, like, hey, this is what I've drafted. Can you confirm this is all correct? Via email, that can all just help you and it just like it's clear communication.
On our team, we actually have a form and zip forms for this, like for the buyer to sign that they're putting in writing they want to waive home inspection.
Do we?
JSG has one, so maybe we can share it. Yeah.
I just have like the clause language. So yeah, if you have one, let me know. Like I'd love to see it because I think that's super helpful to just, especially in this market where people are doing that more and more.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you a little later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Stephanie. Bye.